In the sweltering summer of 2000, a chilling mystery descended upon the small, sun-baked town of Havenwood, Texas, when 5 cousins, 15-year-old twin sisters Sarah and Emily Peterson, their 14-year-old cousin Michael Chun, and the younger pair, 10-year-old twins David and Daniel Miller, vanished without a trace from the remote Peterson family hunting lodge. The lodge, a sprawling, rustic structure nestled deep within the dusty scrubland, had been the site of their annual summer gathering, a cherished tradition meant to foster familial bonds and create lasting memories. Instead, it became the epicenter of a nightmare. The local sheriff's department, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the disappearance, launched an extensive search operation, aided by volunteers who scoured every inch of the surrounding wilderness. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their powerful beams cutting through the pre-dawn darkness, while K-9 units tirelessly tracked scents that ultimately led nowhere. The initial theory, pushed heavily by Sheriff Brody Maxwell, centered on the possibility of a consensual runaway, a misguided teenage adventure gone awry. However, the inclusion of the 2 10-year-olds quickly dismantled that comforting but ultimately false narrative. There was no note, no sign of forced entry, no struggle, just an eerie, inexplicable void where 5 vibrant young lives had been. The beds were neatly made, their personal belongings, phones, wallets, cherished toys, left behind, as if their departure had been sudden, unplanned, and entirely out of their control. Hope, a fragile and fleeting thing, dwindled with each passing day, eventually giving way to a gnawing despair that settled over Havenwood like a permanent shroud. The Peterson, Chun, and Miller families were torn asunder, their lives irrevocably shattered by the unanswered questions and the crushing weight of their children's absence. The case, despite initial fervent efforts, slowly but inexorably turned cold, gathering dust in the archives of unsolved mysteries, a haunting whisper in the wind that occasionally stirred the town's collective memory, a stark reminder of innocence lost and justice denied. For 25 agonizing years, the fate of the Havenwood 5 remained one of Texas's most perplexing and tragic cold cases, a wound that refused to heal. But 25 years later, in the scorching summer of 2025, a startling discovery by an unrelated person would shatter the long-held silence and violently rip open old wounds, setting in motion a chain of events that would finally unearth the horrifying truth. A lone prospector, 73-year-old Silas Blackwood, a man who had spent his life sifting through the earth's hidden treasures, was exploring an uncharted section of the vast, arid terrain far beyond the known boundaries of the Peterson Lodge property, drawn by an old, half-forgotten legend of a lost Spanish silver mine. He wasn't looking for human remains or clues to a 2.5-decade-old mystery. He was searching for glinting ore, for the promise of a bygone fortune. Armed with his trusty metal detector and a lifetime of experience reading the subtle contours of the land, Silas had spent weeks in this desolate expanse, a place so remote even the coyotes gave it a wide berth. On a blistering Tuesday afternoon, the monotonous hum of his metal detector suddenly screeched to life, a high-pitched, insistent whine indicating a substantial metallic object beneath the parched earth. His heart quickened with the familiar thrill of potential discovery. This wasn't the faint signal of a buried coin. This was something large, something significant. He began to dig, the sun beating down mercilessly on his weathered face, sweat stinging his eyes. The soil was stubborn, packed hard by decades of drought, but Silas, fueled by the prospect of silver, persevered. After nearly an hour of arduous labor, his shovel struck something unyielding. Not rock, but metal, cold and smooth. He carefully unearthed the object, brushing away the clinging dirt, and his breath hitched in his throat. It wasn't a strongbox or a miner's tool, or any relic of the fabled silver mine. What he held in his trembling hands was a tarnished, mud-caked silver locket, intricate in its design, clearly old but not ancient. As he cleaned it further, wiping away the grime with his thumb, he saw a faded inscription on the back. SB, always in my heart. A chill, colder than any desert night, ran down his spine. He recognized the initials immediately. Sarah Peterson, the Havenwood 5. The names, once splashed across every news outlet in Texas, were etched into the collective memory of anyone who lived in this region. He knew the story, everyone did. But what truly froze Silas in place was not just the locket, but what lay beneath it. As he continued to excavate around the small, metallic trinket, the ground gave way, revealing a shallow, makeshift grave. The distinct, unmistakable outline of a human skull, eerily small and delicate, stared back at him from the dark earth, its empty eye sockets a silent testament to a long-forgotten horror. This wasn't just a cold case anymore. This was a grave, and the initial, devastating discovery suggested it was only the beginning. The news of Silas Blackwood's grim discovery spread like wildfire, igniting a dormant fear within Havenwood. 25 years of quiet grief were suddenly shattered by the irrefutable evidence that the Peterson cousins had not run away, had not simply vanished, but had met a far more sinister end. The Havenwood Sheriff's Department, now under the leadership of the young, ambitious Sheriff Ethan Riley, was immediately thrust into the spotlight. Riley, a native of Havenwood who had been just a boy when the 5 cousins disappeared, felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He had grown up with the shadow of the cold case, witnessing the pain it inflicted on the families and the town. This was more than just a case for him. It was a chance for redemption, for closure, for justice. The site of the discovery, now a hive of activity, was meticulously cordoned off. Forensic teams, dispatched from the Texas Rangers, swarmed the remote location, their expertise a stark contrast to the overwhelmed local efforts of a quarter-century prior. The small skull and the silver locket were carefully extracted, catalogued, and rushed to the state lab for immediate analysis. Initial reports were grim. The skull, despite the passage of time, showed clear signs of blunt force trauma, unequivocally ruling out natural causes or accidental death. The locket, confirmed by the Peterson family through old photographs, belonged to Sarah Peterson. The implications were chilling. At least one of the Havenwood 5 had been murdered, and her body unceremoniously dumped in the desolate scrubland, an attempt to erase her from existence. Sheriff Riley, a man whose quiet demeanor belied a steel-trap mind and an unwavering commitment to truth, called an immediate, urgent briefing. The fluorescent lights of the Havenwood Sheriff's Department meeting room hummed, casting a pale, clinical glow on the faces of his deputies and the 2 lead Texas Rangers assigned to the case. Senior Ranger Olivia Hayes, sharp, experienced, with a reputation for cracking impossible cases, and her younger partner, Ranger Ben Carter, keen-eyed and analytical. Riley laid out the facts, his voice steady despite the tremor of raw emotion he felt beneath the surface. "This changes everything," he stated, his gaze sweeping across the somber faces. "For 25 years, this town has lived with a ghost. Now we have a body, and if there's one, there are likely more. We are no longer looking for missing persons. We are looking for a killer." Ranger Hayes, her eyes narrowed in contemplation, interjected. "The initial investigation theorized a runaway scenario. Were there any dissenting opinions at the time? Any overlooked evidence?" Riley paused, remembering the hushed whispers, the unspoken doubts. Sheriff Maxwell was resolute in his theory. He had a reputation for closing cases quickly, for keeping the peace. Any counter-arguments were often dismissed. There was a young deputy, a distant relative of the Millers, Deputy Thorne, who pushed for a more thorough search, particularly of the lodge itself and the surrounding properties. He believed something was off, but his concerns were largely ignored. "Thorne," Hayes mused, making a note. "Is he still in law enforcement?" "Retired," Riley replied. "Moved to Arizona years ago. But he might be a good first stop. He saw things then that we might need to revisit now." The next few days were a blur of activity. The initial search radius was vastly expanded, now focusing on areas of disturbed earth, unnatural depressions, anything that could indicate another clandestine burial site. While forensic teams painstakingly combed the scrubland, Sheriff Riley and Ranger Hayes made the somber journey to visit the Peterson family, who now lived a quiet, reclusive life, their home a monument to their enduring grief. The meeting was fraught with raw emotion. Mrs. Peterson, her face etched with decades of sorrow, clutched Sarah's locket, her tears falling freely onto the tarnished silver. "She never took this off," she whispered, her voice a fragile reed. "Never." Mr. Peterson, a man whose shoulders seemed to carry the weight of the world, looked at Riley with a flicker of renewed, yet terrifying, hope. "You really think you can find out what happened, Sheriff? After all this time?" Riley met his gaze, his resolve hardening. "We're going to try, sir. We're going to find the truth." Back at the station, Ranger Carter was poring over the dusty, disorganized files of the original investigation. The sheer volume of material was daunting, but the lack of structure was infuriating. "It's like they wanted to lose things," Carter muttered to himself, sifting through handwritten notes and hastily typed reports. He found several mentions of Deputy Thorne's persistent questions, his almost obsessive focus on a particular detail. A single black and white button found near the lodge's back porch, initially dismissed as a common item, perhaps fallen off a guest's clothing. But Thorne had insisted it was unusual, almost antique, not belonging to any of the victims or their families. The anomaly, Carter murmured, remembering Hayes's constant training mantra, always look for what doesn't belong. He flagged the report, a sudden surge of adrenaline coursing through him. This small, seemingly insignificant detail, ignored by the original investigation, could be the first thread in a very tangled web. The black and white button, rediscovered in the dusty archives, became the focal point of the renewed investigation. Ranger Carter, with Sheriff Riley's immediate approval, sent the button to the state lab for advanced forensic analysis, hoping for any trace evidence, any unique identifier, no matter how minuscule. While they waited for the lab results, Riley and Hayes decided to follow up on Deputy Thorne. A long drive through the arid landscapes of Arizona led them to a small, unassuming house on the outskirts of Tucson, where Thorne, now a man in his late 60s, lived a quiet, retired life. He greeted them with a look of weary surprise, recognizing the badge, but his eyes lit up with a spark of recognition when Riley mentioned the Havenwood 5. "Took you long enough," Thorne said, a wry, bitter smile playing on his lips as he invited them inside. His living room was sparse but meticulously organized, a testament to his continued need for order. "I knew something was wrong from day one. Maxwell just wanted it gone, swept under the rug." Thorne recounted his memories with vivid clarity, as if the events of 25 years ago were still fresh wounds. He described the suffocating pressure from Sheriff Maxwell to declare it a runaway, the dismissive attitude towards any evidence that contradicted this narrative. "The lodge itself," Thorne emphasized, "Maxwell barely let us touch it, said it was traumatizing the family. But I always felt there was something in there, something hidden." He then brought out a worn leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "I kept my own notes. Maxwell wouldn't let me officially document everything. This button, the one you're asking about, I found it near the back door, half buried in the dirt. It wasn't modern. It wasn't from any of their clothes. It felt old, like from a uniform maybe. But I couldn't place it." Thorne meticulously drew a rough sketch of the button in his journal, its distinctive 4 holes forming a square. He also detailed another observation that had haunted him for years: a faint, almost imperceptible scuff mark on the wooden floorboards just inside the back door, as if something heavy had been dragged across it. "I thought it was blood at first," he admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. But Maxwell dismissed it as just an old stain, probably from a hunting trophy. But it wasn't. It was too fresh, too deliberate. The mention of a uniform button sparked a thought in Hayes's mind. "A uniform, you said? What kind of uniform?" Thorne shook his head. "Couldn't say. Just a feeling. Something authoritative, maybe. Not military, but something with a strong, solid presence." As they drove back, the weight of Thorne's suppressed investigation hung heavy in the air. "Maxwell clearly had something to hide, or something he was protecting," Hayes observed, her mind racing. "The question is, what?" Meanwhile, the lab results for the black and white button arrived, and they were astonishing. Ranger Carter called Riley, his voice crackling with excitement. "Sheriff, you're not going to believe this. The button isn't just old, it's unique. The composition of the plastic, the specific dye used, it's a custom-made button. And there are trace fibers on it. Synthetic. Blue. Custom-made?" Riley frowned. "Any idea for whom?" "That's the kicker," Carter replied. "The lab ran it through a historical database of uniform manufacturers. This specific button, with these exact specifications, was produced for only one client in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Havenwood Youth Sports League, specifically for their senior coaches' jackets." A cold, sickening dread washed over Riley. The Havenwood Youth Sports League was a pillar of the community, a local institution. And the senior coaches, they were often respected figures, community leaders, even members of law enforcement. "Blue synthetic fibers," Hayes murmured, processing the information. "A coach's jacket, and a lodge where 5 children disappeared." The pieces began to click into place, forming a terrifying mosaic. The misleading narrative of a runaway, the dismissed evidence, the suppressed investigation. Someone powerful, someone respected, had deliberately orchestrated a cover-up. And the fact that the button was from a coach's jacket, worn by an adult in a position of trust, made the implications even more horrifying. The anomaly had not just been a random object, it was a silent, damning accusation. The investigation shifted gears dramatically. No longer were they blindly searching for a killer. Now they had a distinct profile. A male, likely associated with the Havenwood Youth Sports League around 2000, and someone powerful enough to influence the previous sheriff's department. The focus narrowed to the lodge itself. With new forensic technology, they could now revisit the Peterson Lodge, which had remained locked and untouched for 25 years, a mausoleum of lost hope. The families, upon hearing the news of the button and the new leads, granted immediate access, their desperation for answers outweighing their grief. The lodge, though dust-laden and stagnant, held an eerie stillness. The air was thick with memories, both innocent and terrifying. Riley and Hayes began their methodical search, their eyes now trained to see what Thorne had seen, what Maxwell had deliberately overlooked. The Peterson family lodge, untouched for a quarter-century, was a time capsule of sorrow. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating forgotten laughter and unspeakable horror. The air was heavy, stagnant, imbued with the ghosts of 5 vanished children. Sheriff Riley and Ranger Hayes moved through the silent rooms, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive stillness, a stark contrast to the lively chaos that once filled these walls. They were not just searching for evidence, they were searching for a narrative, a whisper of the events that had transpired here so long ago. Their first stop was the back door, where Deputy Thorne had discovered the black and white button. Ranger Carter, equipped with a portable forensic light source, meticulously swept the area. The scuff mark Thorne had described, faint but unmistakable, became visible under the specialized light. It was indeed a drag mark, consistent with something heavy being pulled across the wooden floor. Further investigation revealed microscopic traces of fabric embedded in the wood, too degraded for immediate identification, but enough to confirm a struggle or an intentional movement of a body. The implications were chilling. Something had happened here, right at the threshold of the lodge, contradicting the runaway theory entirely. Next, they moved to the bedrooms the children had occupied. Sarah and Emily's room was eerily pristine, the beds neatly made, as if awaiting their return. But as Hayes ran her gloved hand along the wooden headboard of Sarah's bed, she felt a subtle irregularity. A small, almost invisible splinter had been recently broken. Under magnification, they found a single, faint fingerprint on the rough wood. It wasn't Sarah's or Emily's or any family member. It was a partial but distinct adult male print. The lab confirmed it was a match to an existing database. The print belonged to Samuel Sam Miller, David and Daniel's uncle, a man who had been at the lodge that fateful weekend, a beloved figure in the Havenwood Youth Sports League, and a senior coach whose name was on the list provided by the lab concerning the unique button. Sam Miller, then 42, had been the head coach of the Havenwood High School football team, a pillar of the community, a man universally respected. He had been among the most vocal in comforting the grieving families, a constant presence at the initial searches, seemingly devastated by the disappearance of his nephews and their cousins. The shock was palpable. The hidden-in-plain-sight villain, archetype had materialized with terrifying clarity. Riley felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The man who had organized countless youth events, who had inspired young athletes, who had wept with the families, was now the prime suspect. The misleading narrative of the runaway had successfully shielded a monster for decades. The team expanded their search, now focusing on areas around the lodge that might have been overlooked, driven by Thorne's persistent feeling that something was off. They discovered a dilapidated old boathouse near a stagnant, murky pond, a structure so overgrown with weeds and partially collapsed that it had been deemed too unsafe to properly search during the original investigation. Armed with updated safety protocols and equipment, a team entered the crumbling structure. The stench of decay was immediate and overpowering. Underneath a pile of moldering tarpaulins and rusted fishing equipment, they found what no one had dared to hope for, yet everyone had feared. 5 shallow graves, meticulously concealed beneath the dirt floor. The remains of Michael Chun, Emily Peterson, David Miller, and Daniel Miller. All showed signs of blunt force trauma, similar to Sarah. The 5th grave was empty, save for a small, tarnished silver earring, identical to one Sarah Peterson had owned. The discovery was a punch to the gut, a horrifying validation of 25 years of dread. The 5th grave, empty, confirmed that Sarah had been buried elsewhere, that Silas Blackwood's initial discovery was indeed the first. The unveiling had begun, peeling back layers of deception, revealing a depth of depravity that shocked even the most hardened investigators. The small silver earring, an anomaly in its own right, proved that Sarah had indeed been at the boathouse at some point, linking her directly to the other victims. Riley and Hayes immediately moved to secure an arrest warrant for Sam Miller. The clock was ticking. They knew a man like Miller, cunning and ruthless, would either flee or attempt to cover his tracks further once he sensed the net tightening. They didn't want to alert him until they were ready to move. They reviewed every detail, every piece of evidence, every interview from 25 years ago. A pattern emerged. During the initial investigation, Sam Miller had been remarkably calm, almost unnervingly so. He had directed search efforts away from the boathouse, citing its instability and the risk it posed to volunteers. He had volunteered to organize the memorial service for the missing children, a public display of grief that now seemed sickeningly performative. He had actively championed Sheriff Maxwell's runaway theory, offering anecdotal evidence of teenage rebellious streaks, subtly shifting the focus away from any foul play. The sheer audacity of his deception was breathtaking. The pieces fit. The button from his coach's jacket, the fingerprint in Sarah's room, the drag mark, the hidden graves. Sam Miller, the pillar of the community, was the monster. The air in Havenwood crackled with tension, a suffocating humidity that mirrored the emotional storm brewing beneath the surface. With the arrest warrant for Sam Miller secured, Sheriff Riley, accompanied by Ranger Hayes and a tactical unit, moved swiftly and decisively. They approached Miller's sprawling, meticulously manicured ranch house on the outskirts of town, a property that exuded an aura of prosperity and respectability, a stark contrast to the horrific secrets it likely harbored. The arrest was executed with chilling precision. Sam Miller, caught entirely off guard, initially maintained his composure, his face a mask of feigned indignation. "What is the meaning of this, Sheriff?" he demanded, his voice resonating with an unearned authority. But when Riley presented the evidence, the photograph of Sarah's locket, the forensic report on the button, the images of the disturbed earth at the boathouse, and finally, the match of his fingerprint to the one found in Sarah's room, Miller's facade began to crumble. A flicker of fear, quickly replaced by a cold, calculating defiance, passed through his eyes. He remained silent, his jaw clenched, as he was handcuffed and escorted to the Havenwood Sheriff's Department. The interrogation room was stark, clinical, a confined space designed to amplify the weight of guilt. Riley and Hayes sat across from Miller, their gazes unwavering, their resolve an unyielding force against his practiced composure. They laid out the timeline, the evidence, the undeniable truth they had painstakingly pieced together. Miller listened, his expression unreadable, a master manipulator still attempting to control the narrative. "I was helping," he finally said, his voice low and even, a chilling calm in the face of such damning accusations. "I was trying to find them. I was heartbroken." "Heartbroken, Mr. Miller?" Hayes challenged, her voice cutting through his pretense. "Or calculating. You moved the bodies. You ensured Sheriff Maxwell, shut down the real investigation. You watched the families suffer for 25 years, knowing the truth." The mention of Sheriff Maxwell's name seemed to trigger something in Miller. A subtle shift in his posture, a tightening around his eyes. He saw the trap. His silence became deliberate, heavy, a wall they knew they had to breach. This was the moment for the confession, a clinical, remorseless recounting of his horrific acts. Riley, sensing the shift, adopted a different tactic, appealing not to Miller's conscience, which he knew was absent, but to his ego. "You were clever, Sam. You were very clever. For 25 years, you got away with it. You fooled everyone. How did you do it? How did you manage to control everything?" The subtle flattery, the acknowledgement of his past cunning, was the key. Miller, a narcissist at his core, couldn't resist. His lips twisted into a faint, chilling smile. "They were just kids," he began, his voice devoid of emotion, a horrifying calm permeating his words. "Always running around, always loud. They stumbled onto something they shouldn't have seen." He described how the cousins, playing near the boathouse, had accidentally witnessed him engaged in a clandestine, illegal activity, a sophisticated dogfighting ring he operated in secret, a lucrative sideline hidden beneath his respectable facade. The twins, David and Daniel, had seen him with a large sum of cash, arguing with another man. Michael Chun, older and more observant, had recognized one of the dogs, a champion fighter from a local farm. Sarah and Emily, always curious, had started asking questions, too many questions. "They were going to tell," Miller stated simply, as if discussing a minor inconvenience. "They were going to ruin everything. My reputation, my business." He admitted to luring them, one by one, to the boathouse under the guise of showing them a rare bird's nest, a cruel deception. He'd silenced David and Daniel first, then Michael, using a heavy wrench, his voice unwavering as he described the blunt force trauma. Emily, witnessing the horror, tried to run. He caught her by the back door of the lodge, dragging her back to the boathouse, creating the scuff mark Thorne had observed. Sarah, the most defiant, had fought back, scratching and biting. He'd killed her there, near the lodge, enraged by her resistance. He admitted to burying her quickly in the scrubland, away from the others, in a fit of panic, desperate to distance her from the boathouse, where he'd committed the other murders. He'd then meticulously cleaned up the boathouse, burying the other four, and then, with chilling foresight, planted the idea of a runaway to Sheriff Maxwell, a man he knew was easily manipulated and eager to maintain the town's tranquil image. He even suggested places to search, knowing full well they would yield nothing. The discovery of Sarah's locket had been a cruel twist of fate, an oversight in his otherwise meticulously planned cover-up. Miller's confession was a horrifying testament to his psychopathy, a clinical recounting of monstrous acts, delivered without a shred of remorse or regret. The hidden-in-plain-sight villain had finally been unveiled, his true face a reflection of pure evil. The weight of 25 years of unanswered questions lifted, replaced by the grim, undeniable truth. The families would finally have their answers, however devastating. The shocking confession of Sam Miller ripped through Havenwood like a tornado, leaving a trail of disbelief, anger, and profound sorrow in its wake. The man who had been a local hero, a mentor to countless young athletes, was now unmasked as a cold-blooded killer. The news sent shockwaves beyond Havenwood, dominating national headlines as one of the most significant cold case breaks in recent memory. The community grappled with the insidious nature of the evil that had lurked among them for so long, hidden beneath a veneer of respectability. The media, in a feeding frenzy, descended upon Havenwood, eager to capture the raw emotions of a town coming to terms with such a horrific betrayal. For Sheriff Riley, the confession brought a grim satisfaction, a sense of justice finally being served, but it was overshadowed by the immense tragedy of the lost lives. He personally delivered the news to the Peterson, Chun, and Miller families, a somber duty that weighed heavily on his soul. The families' reactions were a complex mixture of agony and relief. The truth, however brutal, finally provided an end to the agonizing uncertainty, allowing them to begin the long, arduous process of genuine grieving. A small, private memorial service was held at the boathouse, now a sacred site, where the remains of Michael, Emily, David, and Daniel were finally laid to rest with dignity. Sarah, reunited with her family, was buried alongside her twin sister, her locket placed gently in her hands. It was a somber day, marked by tears and quiet prayers, but also by a palpable sense of closure. The old, dilapidated boathouse was later dismantled, a symbol of the dark secrets it had held. With Miller's confession, Sheriff Ethan Riley became an overnight hero, lauded for his perseverance and astute investigative skills. Ranger Olivia Hayes and Ben Carter also received commendations for their crucial roles in solving the seemingly impossible case. The success of the investigation, however, was not just a testament to modern forensic techniques and tenacious detective work. It was also a vindication for Deputy Thorne. His intuition over logic, his persistent questions and overlooked observations from a quarter-century prior, proved to be the crucial missing pieces that eventually led to Miller's downfall. Riley personally called Thorne, thanking him profusely and acknowledging his courage in speaking out against the prevailing narrative all those years ago. Thorne, his voice thick with emotion, expressed a quiet satisfaction. "It wasn't about being right, Sheriff," he said. "It was about those kids. They deserved justice." Sam Miller was indicted on 5 counts of first-degree murder. His trial was swift and brutal, a public airing of his heinous crimes. Despite his attempts to portray himself as a victim of circumstance, his clinical confession and the overwhelming physical evidence left no room for doubt. The jury, after only a few hours of deliberation, returned a guilty verdict on all counts. Miller was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his days in a maximum security prison, far removed from the community he had so cruelly deceived. The Havenwood Youth Sports League, reeling from the scandal, underwent a complete overhaul, implementing stricter background checks and supervision protocols, determined to cleanse itself of the stain Miller had left behind. Sheriff Brody Maxwell, now in his late 70s and living in disgrace, faced renewed public scrutiny. While no direct evidence linked him to Miller's crimes, his deliberate suppression of Thorne's investigation and his unwavering insistence on the runaway theory were heavily criticized. His legacy was forever tainted, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of negligence and a desire to preserve an illusion of peace over the pursuit of truth. For the families of the Havenwood Five, the resolution, while bringing no back their beloved children, offered a path forward. They found solace in the knowledge that Miller was behind bars, no longer a hidden threat. They channeled their grief into advocating for other cold case families, their painful experience transforming into a powerful voice for justice. The community of Havenwood, scarred but resilient, slowly began the process of healing. The shadow of the cold case, which had hung over the town for so long, finally lifted, allowing a fragile hope to blossom. The memory of Sarah, Emily, Michael, David, and Daniel would forever remain a part of Havenwood's history, a somber reminder of a devastating loss, but also a testament to the enduring power of truth and the unwavering pursuit of justice, even when it takes 25 long, agonizing years to find. The relentless sun beat down on the parched Texas landscape as Sheriff Ethan Riley stood overlooking the newly designated memorial site, a simple, granite monument bearing the names of the Havenwood Five. It was a year after Sam Miller's conviction, and the dust, both literal and metaphorical, was slowly settling. The once dilapidated boathouse had been completely demolished, its ground now cleansed and consecrated. In its place, native wildflowers bloomed, a vibrant testament to life reclaiming what death had defiled. Riley had made it a point to visit the site often, a quiet pilgrimage that grounded him, reminding him of the profound responsibility he carried. He often thought of Deputy Thorne, now a friend, who had visited Havenwood a few months prior, his eyes welling up as he saw the memorial. Thorne had finally found peace, knowing his instincts had been validated, and the children he had silently grieved for had received justice. The families, though forever changed, were slowly rebuilding their lives. The Peterson family had started a foundation in their daughters' names, dedicated to supporting cold case investigations, their grief transformed into a powerful engine for change. The Chun and Miller families, once fractured by the unspoken questions, were now united in their shared sorrow and the long-awaited closure. They often held joint gatherings, celebrating the lives of their lost children, ensuring their memories lived on, not as victims of a monster, but as beloved individuals whose lives were tragically cut short. The town of Havenwood, once gripped by a collective trauma, was learning to breathe again. The annual summer gathering, which had been suspended for 2.5 decades, was cautiously reinstated, a smaller, more intimate affair, but one filled with a renewed sense of community and vigilance. Parents held their children a little closer, and the unspoken lesson of Sam Miller's deception resonated deeply. Evil could lurk in the most unexpected places, hidden behind the most trusted faces. The local law enforcement had undergone a significant transformation. Sheriff Maxwell's successor, handpicked by the county, was a proponent of transparency and thoroughness, dedicated to erasing the stains of the past. The archives of the Havenwood Sheriff's Department were reorganized, digitized, and rigorously cross-referenced, ensuring no future anomaly would ever be overlooked. The new training protocols emphasized critical thinking, challenging assumptions, and most importantly, listening to the quiet doubts, the gut feelings that often pointed towards the truth. Ranger Olivia Hayes and Ben Carter, having achieved national recognition for their work on the Havenwood Five case, continued to tackle cold cases across Texas, their partnership forged in the crucible of Miller's horrific crimes. They often referenced the Havenwood case in their lectures to new recruits, highlighting the importance of every detail, every piece of evidence, and the profound impact a single, overlooked clue could have on a 25-year-old mystery. Riley, standing at the memorial, felt a familiar ache in his chest, a poignant blend of sadness for the lives lost and pride in the justice achieved. He thought of the words Sam Miller had spoken in the interrogation room, the chilling indifference with which he had recounted his heinous acts. It was a stark reminder of the darkness that existed, but also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the unyielding pursuit of truth, and the enduring power of memory. The sun began its descent, painting the Texas sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the landscape. The names on the granite monument seemed to glow in the fading light. Sarah Peterson, Emily Peterson, Michael Chun, David Miller, Daniel Miller. Remembered, honored, and finally at peace. Their story, once a whisper of despair, was now a powerful, dramatic narrative of resilience, a testament to the truth that, no matter how long it takes, justice will ultimately find its way into the light. The quiet town of Havenwood would forever carry the scars, but it would also carry the lessons learned, ensuring that the 5 cousins, tragically lost but finally found, would never again be forgotten. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, a soft, mournful tune, carrying with it the echoes of the past, now finally definitively laid to rest. The media circus had long departed Havenwood, leaving behind a quieter, though forever altered, community. Sheriff Riley found himself facing a different kind of challenge: the internal healing of his department. The revelation of Sheriff Maxwell's complicity in the cover-up had eroded trust, casting a long shadow over the very institution meant to protect the town. He initiated mandatory ethics training and open dialogue sessions, fostering an environment where deputies felt empowered to question, to challenge, and to uphold the true spirit of justice. He often referred to Deputy Thorne's unwavering integrity, using him as an example of what it meant to be a true law enforcement officer, even when facing immense pressure. The Peterson family, in their continued advocacy, had played a pivotal role in establishing new state legislation known as the Havenwood 5 Act. This act mandated a regular, independent review of all cold cases older than 10 years, ensuring that no file would ever again gather dust indefinitely simply because of local politics or indifference. It created a specialized cold case unit within the Texas Rangers, guaranteeing that resources and expertise would be consistently applied to the most challenging unsolved mysteries. This legislative victory brought a measure of comfort to the families, knowing that their children's tragedy had sparked a tangible, positive change that would potentially prevent other families from enduring their agonizing weight. Mrs. Peterson, her eyes still holding a deep well of sorrow, had often told Riley, "We don't want another family to suffer what we did. Not knowing is a torture far worse than any truth." The old Peterson Lodge, after the boathouse was demolished, became the subject of much debate. The families initially considered selling it, but a surprising offer came from the Havenwood Historical Society. They proposed transforming the lodge into a research and memorial center dedicated to cold case awareness and victim advocacy, a place where the story of the Havenwood 5 would be preserved, not as a grim spectacle, but as a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope for justice. After much deliberation, the families agreed. The lodge, once a site of idyllic summer gatherings and later unspeakable horror, would be repurposed for good, its walls bearing witness to both the darkness and the resilience of the human spirit. The renovation process was meticulous, focusing on preserving the original architecture while integrating modern exhibition spaces. Visitors could walk through the halls, learn about the case, and understand the importance of never giving up on the search for truth. Riley often visited the evolving center, watching the transformation with a quiet satisfaction. He saw the potential for the lodge to become a place of education, a living monument to the children whose lives were cut short, and a testament to the power of community in healing and advocating for justice. The memory of Sam Miller, the hidden-in-plain-sight villain, served as a constant reminder of the vigilance required to protect a community. The psychological impact of his betrayal was profound. Many in Havenwood struggled with feelings of guilt and self-reproach, questioning how they could have been so blind to the monster living among them. Therapists and counselors offered support groups, helping residents process their collective trauma and rebuild trust. Riley, understanding the need for internal reflection, participated in these sessions, sharing his own struggles with the weight of the past and the responsibility of the present. He learned that true justice wasn't just about putting a killer behind bars. It was about healing a wounded community, restoring faith in institutions, and ensuring that such a tragedy could never be repeated. He reflected on the words of Ranger Hayes during one of their debriefs. "A community isn't just buildings and people, Sheriff. It's a living, breathing entity. When it's wounded, it needs time, care, and truth to heal." The Havenwood 5 case had irrevocably changed him, transforming him from a promising young sheriff into a seasoned leader.